The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy.
Hello, and welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. I'm Josh Edison, he's Dr. M. Dentith. Together we are the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, which I just said twice now. That intro doesn't work.
Start again?
No, I think...
Because this is the second time we've attempted this, because the first time, Josh didn't even know my name.
Well, not I didn't know it. I just got it wrong. But now you've ruined the magic, Matthew. You've torn aside the veil that made us appear.
The veil was sundered a long time ago.
Nonsense.
And you sundered it.
That's a dirty lie.
Sundered it.
Everyone watching and listening to this was under the impression that we're utter professionals who make no mistakes whatsoever. Thanks to our years of cunning trickery, but now it's all been blown away. Is there any point in going on?
Yes.
I suppose there is. We still have 29 minutes and 35 seconds to fill. So let's do that then. Do we have anything to start off with?
Not really. I mean, frankly, we've kind of exhausted all of our repertoire in previous episodes, and with no actual news. Oh, that means we have had correspondence.
We have had correspondence, yep.
But that correspondence is going to be kind of dealt with when we do the news segment. But thank you for your correspondences.
Thank you indeed.
It's been great. 2 emails in the space of 1 week. I mean, I almost had a heart attack.
I know. I had to fan myself with a
small child.
How do you imagine I was holding a proper fan? And the gesture looks slightly less masturbatory, but that doesn't matter. So, given that we seem to have a decent chunk of news this week, but we're not doing the same trick as last week and just spending a whole week talking about news, we're going to rattle through them quickly. Nevertheless, we should probably rattle on.
Indeed.
Breaking conspiracy theories in the news.
Let's start with some local news and an update. Kim.com, the German-born New Zealand permanent resident and founder of Mega Upload, has received a confidential payment for being illegally surveilled by the New Zealand police force at the behest of the US government. Not that the police or the US government are willing to admit they did any wrong. That would be toxic.
And no one wants to be impolite by pointing that out.
Now, talking about being polite, some Muslims in Southern California were so concerned by a radical in their midst, they shopped him to the police, only to find out that Farouk I should have actually made you do this bit here, Farouk al-Azi, real name Craig Montiel, was an FBI plant who'd been sent into their group to ferret out terrorists and terrorist sympathizers.
Yes, Montiel was a former criminal who was tapped by the FBI to go undercover once he left jail. It's fair to say he was a little too enthusiastic in his work, bringing up jihad over and over again until members of the community he had infiltrated felt he might be saying more than idle words.
Now, the consequences of this infiltration have had real-world effects. Leading US Muslim organizations have suspended contact with the FBI in protest over this and similar matters. Turns out trying to entrap people to commit acts of terror in order to then arrest them as terrorists is a bad idea. It's actually probably best if the government and its agencies didn't conspire against its citizenry.
You'd think so. And now, Romania. We turn to our Romanian correspondent, the Count. That's you.
Right, well, so Romania is
You're
in
not going
a
to do
bit...
a voice?
It'd be very racist.
Yeah, probably.
Romania is in a bit of turmoil due... I can't
Don't
even do it now.
Don't do the voice.
Romania is in a bit of turmoil due to the leader of the Social Democrats, Liviu Dragnea, being charged with embezzling EU funds.
Not to interrupt, but did he actually do it?
Probably. His party, the current government in Romania, tried earlier this year to legalise graft, so it's not exactly surprising he'd be behind some dodgy accountancy. Indeed, the fact he can only lead the party, but not stand for public office, comes out of the fact he has a prior conviction for electoral fraud. So really, what's a little bit of embezzlement?
I guess this is all conspiratorial because of how secretive it's all been?
Yes, and also no.
No?
So PSD, the Social Democrats, are openly corrupt. That this is almost not a secret at all. It just gets back to the myriad ways in which you can keep a plot secret. Romanians would say this was predictable, if not actually public knowledge. But obviously for people in the EU, not so much.
Now, Alex Jones news.
Ooh, exciting.
Apparently he's been repurposing Russia Today articles on both InfoWars and Prison Planet without permission for a while now.
Now, the reason why this is interesting is that Russia Today is basically a propaganda arm of the Russian government. Not just that, but Jones has been characteristically riled by the idea he spreads propaganda or disinformation. I've been writing a thing on evidence. I'm using the Russian term there, disinformation. Spreads propaganda or disinformation for the Russians.
Since Jones is syndicating Russia Today content without permission, I guess we can say he's not a paid shill for Russia.
Yep, Jones is no professional propagandist. He's just a well-intentioned fan.
So, looks like it's official, chemtrails are real. That is, if you believe the recent report at DC Clothesline, whose tag is airing out America's dirty laundry.
At competitive prices.
Anyway, they report that as there is a congressional hearing entitled Geoengineering, Innovation, Research and Technology, they don't say that it's referred to as GERT, but I assume it must be, then that means chemtrails are official.
So I'm assuming people who are on GERT are GERTese.
You'd think they'd have to be. I don't see...
Anyway, turns out chemtrails are not real, it's not true. The hearing is looking into geoengineering, particularly whether it can be used to combat climate change, but nothing in the hearing suggests chemtrails, chemical agents spread by planes in order to make people sick and or mind control them, are anything other than contrails. When aerial spraying is mentioned, it's talked about with respect to cloud seeding and the like. There has thus far been no revelation of a chemtrail agenda.
Which is to say, Detective Constable Clothesline is rather jumping the gun, thinking that a congressional hearing into geoengineering confirms the existence of a purported and unproven geoengineering technique.
Do you think anyone outside the Commonwealth will get the Detective Constable joke?
No, but having made it, I think I know what our next children's book should be about.
Excellent. And now, the obligatory Donald Trump news.
Yes, we now know that WikiLeaks was at least trying to advise the Trump campaign in 2016 via Donald Trump Jr. WikiLeaks kept trying to shop information to the Trump team about Hillary Clinton and the Clinton campaign, and while Trump Jr. often didn't respond directly to WikiLeaks, many of the things they suggested conveniently appeared on Junior or Senior's Twitter timelines within hours of WikiLeaks making contact. My voice is going funny.
It will be the arsenic I put in the water. And
Yes,
it gets weirder. It now seems that far-right blogger Chuck Johnson, who should not be confused with former right-winger Charles Johnson, may have been the person who tipped off WikiLeaks in the first place, leading to their volunteering to help out the Trump campaign. Frankly, it's looking very likely that WikiLeaks is not the non-partisan group Julian Assange would like us to believe it is.
Really?
I know! It's scandalous.
Indeed. Speaking of which, we now return to the seedy subject of Harvey Weinstein.
Covert rape allegations.
While the ubiquity of sexual abuse claims and the open secret nature of some of the worst of them hint at a widespread conspiracy of silence in the entertainment industry, recent revelations have pointed at more overtly conspiratorial activities in the Weinstein camp. It's been revealed that he hired private investigators to gather information on his accusers, by talking to journalists to find out if women had been talking to the press, and by interviewing the women themselves, most notably actress Rose McGowan, under false pretenses.
And the plot thickens with the recent news that a warrant for Ms. McGowan was issued on the charges of drug possession, relating to an incident where her wallet was found with cocaine in it, having been left on an aeroplane. Now, McGowan claims that she isn't a cocaine user. She's very definitely team marijuana, given she has shares in a
I believe.
medical marijuana.
I don't know if it's even medical, given that there are some states where it is now legal.
Anyway, she has
She's a great big old pothead, not a coke fiend.
In big weed. So she's implying the drugs were planted. Now, planted or not, the incident occurred back in January. So it's interesting, to say the least, that it's only come up now that she's the public face of the campaign against Harvey Weinstein.
Indeed. Now, if we're going to talk about the Weinsteins of this world, we should also talk about the Roy Moores.
It's well attested now that Roy Moore, Alabama Senate candidate for the Republicans, had relationships with people in their early to late teens back when he was a jobbing lawyer in his 30s.
Conspiracy theories in conservative circles are beginning to circulate that these stories are a hit job on Roy Moore, emanating not just from the Democrats but also the Republican establishment. Apparently everyone is afraid of the change Moore will bring to the Senate, and thus the donkeys and elephants of US politics have banded together to stop him.
What has been lost in all of this, however, is that A, Moore hasn't denied most of the claims, and B, he's confirmed that whenever he did date teenagers, he asked for permission to do so from their parents, which gets creepier the more you think about it.
Puts one in mind of the Louis C.K. business.
Yes, actually, I almost thought of putting that into the news and then thought, it's just getting a bit too much.
It is a bit.
And of course now the Al Franken stuff.
Yes. Anyway.
Frankly, we should just cancel all men in positions of power everywhere and start again from scratch.
Who knows? Could just so crazy it just might work.
It's going to work, Joshua. I've already started the project. That's why your voice keeps going. It's the arsenic in the water.
Nice. Finally, some news salient to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Dr. David Kelly, the weapons inspector whose mysterious death in the UK has sparked a lot of conspiracy theories, is back in the news.
Now, the coroner's report or inquest into David Kelly's death appears to be closed for 70 years, which is frustrating those who claim his death was not a suicide. Doubly mysterious is that there's no mention of this in the Hutton Inquiry report into Kelly's death. Hutton applied a 70-year embargo on the result of the inquest, and it raises questions as to why.
Yes, it does. And that, I believe, do you do the catchphrase every time?
No, we can share
you can share
the
it,
catchphrase.
okay. And that is all the news. Actually, the news that is fit to spit. It just feels a bit, I don't know, feels a bit spitty, if you know what I mean.
It's fit to spit, Josh. It's fit to spit.
Okay. I just feel like I'm somehow spitting at the audience. I don't know. They're my hang-ups, Matthew. I will own them.
Yeah,
I'll
whatever
take
fetish you have, I'm willing to service it.
Indeed. Now. We return. We return to the false flag kick. The false flag
extravaganza.
The false flag extravaganza. That we had been on until we were interrupted first by news and then by whatever we did 2 weeks ago. It's been so long I've forgotten. The Dan Brown reviews, yeah. And the JFK. But anyway, stuff keeps happening, but stuff has abated sufficiently that we can talk about a couple more false flags. The one today is the USS Liberty incident.
It feels if we should do some kind of patriotic liberty, the American way.
But we're
sausages,
not Americans,
donuts,
so I don't really see that we're sausages. Hot dogs, surely.
I'm a vegan. I have no idea.
What we meat eaters get up to, yes, it could be anything. It could be literally anything in a hot dog.
It's mostly meaty flatulence, as far as I can tell.
That's the best part. Now, this is another bit of a funny one, in that it shows up on lists of false flags.
It sure does. That's where I got it from.
And yet it doesn't, like, when we get into it, we'll see there's a few sort of overtly false flaggy things that get mentioned, but the incident itself doesn't really seem that false flaggish.
It looks false flag adjacent.
So let's just go through it and see what we think. So shall I kick things off?
Yes, give us the history lesson.
Okay.
You're the history meister.
I'll be the history person, and then you can dive in with your conspiratorial analyses.
Why are you making it look as if I'm going to do some kind of tiger claw?
I just assumed you weren't going to do that.
See, those of you who are listening to the podcast are missing out on some terrible, almost prop comedy. We should actually do prop comedy at some point.
We should. But make no silent prop comedy.
Oh yes, people will never know.
Purely for the benefit of our viewing listeners, or possibly listener, going by the stats. Anyway, so
they like to watch it 17 times in a row, so that's fine.
Yeah. So the USS Liberty incident. This happened during the 6-Day War in 1967, which was fought between Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria.
That's a lot of countries.
It really is. Somewhat lopsided, I believe. It was Israel.
One country the other three, I think.
Something like yeah. It's a funny one, but this is a particularly funny aspect of it. On the 8th of June, in the middle of the Six-Day War, the USS Liberty was attacked by the Israeli Air Force and Navy. Now, the USS Liberty was in international waters at the time, off the coast of Sinai, I think it was. So the US was not directly involved in the Six-Day War, but it was something they very much wanted to keep an eye on. So the USS Liberty was there. That's what it was doing. It was monitoring the conflict. So the ship was, I don't believe it was sunk, but it was attacked by Israeli fighter jets, torpedoed by boats from the Israeli Navy, ships rather, I suppose, we're being technical, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think boats are only submarines. That's the wacky, the Navy terminology. I think they get very upset if you call their ships boats.
What do you think I am, Josh? A seaman?
I don't know. You have a seaman-y look to you. Couldn't resist that one. I'm sorry. Now... Returning to seriousness, because we get into the bit where people died and were wounded and so on. So I don't believe the ship was sunk, but 34 crew members were killed, a further 171 were wounded. Now, there doesn't seem to be any doubt that Israel were the ones behind the attack.
And that they apologised for the attack. They went,
So
sorry, that was us. Didn't mean to do it. We thought you were an Egyptian ship.
Yeah, that was their claim. They thought they'd identified an Egyptian ship and attacked, and then once they realised that it was actually an American ship, they broke off the attack and I think offered aid to the remaining crew members. So straight away, doesn't seem false flaggy to begin with, right? Everyone agrees it was Israel. It wasn't Israel pretending to be someone else. It wasn't someone else pretending to be Israel. So initially, the controversy comes from the fact that while Israel has claimed from the outset, and they conducted an investigation, and so did the US, and both investigations found that yes, it was an accidental friendly fire incident, a lot of people have claimed that there was nothing accidental about it, and that Israel deliberately attacked USS Liberty. So that's... I mean, you wouldn't call it a false flag,
No, so
would
at
you?
this point in the story, even if you go... Israel changed their story and went, oh, it was an accident, but actually it was deliberate, that wouldn't make it a false flag.
No.
I mean, it would be a false flag if, say, Israel attacked the ship, intending to destroy it, hoping there'd be no survivors, and then blamed it on a different government. That would be a false flag. And as we'll see, that theory does exist in the panoply of hypotheses to explain what happened at that particular point in time. But as it stands, the current story is not quite a false flag, at least not quite yet.
No. So, I mean, assuming these more... and this is, of course, a conspiracy theory. It's not a false flag, but it is a conspiracy theory. The theory is that Israel deliberately attacked the USS Liberty and
then claimed after the fact, no, it was an accident. We didn't mean to do it, even though we did. And
the fact that both the US and Israel conducted investigations which found that it was accidental means that they must be engaged in some sort of cover-up.
Yeah.
At the very least, Israel, possibly Israel and the US. So there are conspiratorial allegations there. I suppose the question to ask is why?
Yes, the
why
question
would
is...
they do it? If assuming it was deliberate,
So
why deliberately attack?
If we take the accidental cause off the table, then you have to ask, well, why would Israel attack a ship which is allied to the state of Israel at that particular point in time? And that's where the conspiracy theories come up. So one hypothesis is that it was to stop the US from learning that Israel was about to violate a ceasefire by attacking the Golan Heights.
Now, this really doesn't work, basically, when you look at I assume this was applied much after the fact, because the fact is that the ceasefire that Israel is accused of being about to violate, didn't actually exist. Apparently, this happened on the 8th of June. Apparently, the ceasefire that they're talking about wasn't declared until the 9th of June, so they couldn't have been...
Just a very forward-thinking attack.
Yes.
We might have a ceasefire, so we better attack now.
So that one doesn't really seem to stand up, but... there are other claims that simply the Liberty was monitoring communications from both, or I suppose all sides, given there were 4 nations involved. So it's possible, one claim is simply that Israel just didn't want people knowing what they were up to. They didn't like their communications being monitored, which sounds a bit more plausible.
Yeah, and I mean, in that respect, you don't even need to destroy the ship in that situation.
Yes.
You attack it, then the commander is likely to withdraw, making it harder to monitor it.
To moniker it.
Just makes it harder to moniker. or to even monitor the... No, see, monitor is obviously a truncation of monitor communication. It's a military term, Josh.
It is.
I'm surprised you don't understand that. Yes, we're monitoring this situation. We're monitoring the communications in this situation.
You'd think with my vast knowledge of the difference between ships and boats, I'd have heard that, term before.
What to monitor is, I'm really disappointed.
No, I'm afraid I've let us all
But
down.
yes, that's one of those situations where it's kind of plausible to go, well, commit an attack, the ship withdraws, and then your problem's basically solved.
So that's one slightly more plausible theory. In 2001, there was a book called Body of Secrets by a man called James Bamford, who was a former ABC News producer. In this book, he says that Israel deliberately attacked the Liberty to prevent the discovery of alleged war crimes. He claimed that the IDF had killed up around, 400 Egyptian prisoners, and that they were afraid that the US was going to find out about it, and so that's why the Liberty was attacked. Again, this is a claim, but I don't know that... I mean, certainly the 400 bodies of executed prisoners haven't shown up. There had been apparently a large battle in the town where he claimed that these war crimes had occurred, but the official story, at least, is that any casualties there were as a result of the conflict, not prisoners of war being executed.
That needed to be covered up. And now we get to the false flags, because some people have postulated that the attack on the USS Liberty is entirely due to Israel trying to convince the Americans were being attacked by Egypt. And that's a false flag.
That would have been a false flag, yes. So what I suppose, the theory is that it was a failed false flag operation, which, as you say, if they had actually sunk it and it had gone down with all hands, then and then the IDF buggered off before anyone knew what was going on, then I can see how that could perhaps have worked. Well, I mean, it
all kind of depends on the control of information. So imagine, and we're speculating here about matters militarily. Militarily? I'm just not working.
Military? Yes.
Yeah, that works just as well as the word I use. I like the way you moniker these things. It's quite great.
Yep, no.
You can imagine a situation whereby Israel decides to attack the USS Liberty because they want to convince the Americans that they're being attacked by the Egyptians.
If, say, they wanted to get America involved in this war, where they were fighting by their own against three other nations.
Presumably, military intelligence is monitoring all communications, or monitoring. And you can imagine a situation where you start the attack, but the Americans immediately wire someone in the theatre of operations, we're being attacked by Israel. At which point you failed at your false flag. Then you go, whoopsie, sorry, misidentification. We thought you were a different ship. We're pulling back now. Whereas you can imagine a situation where you're monitoring or monitoring. Then you might go, they haven't actually worked out it's us. We can sink the ship. So that would make it plausible on some level to think it was an attempted false flag that failed at the moment of operation. And of course that's where the debate is here. What was the motivation, if there was motivation, if we don't accept the accident hypothesis for the attack? Were they trying to make the attack on the USS Liberty look like a false flag, but did they fail in some sense?
Yes, it all seems a bit weird, simply because of how quickly word got back that Israel had been behind it. Apparently, Lyndon B. Johnson, president at the time, had supposedly launched aircraft targeted against Cairo. There are some debate as to whether or not they may have even been armed with nuclear weapons. The aircraft were recalled, however, before they reached Cairo, once it was clear that A, the Liberty hadn't actually been sunk, and B, it had been Israel who'd carried out the attack. So it kind of sounds like if it was an attempted false flag, it was a pretty rubbish attempt. They seem to have been rumbled straight away. So we can only assume that if it really was, that it could only have worked if they had sort of, just destroyed the ship instantly. But that didn't appear to be the case, and it didn't sound like it was ever going to be the case, given that they first sort of, flew jets over it and attacked, and then later had ships come up and start firing torpedoes. Yeah, it's not impossible, but it doesn't sound plausible.
Now, I suppose a lot of this does rest on why do we think the attack was deliberate in the first place? So why do certain people discount the accident hypothesis?
And now, a lot of the people who claim that the attack was deliberate historically have been survivors of the attack itself. So obviously we can't, these are people with first-hand experience of what actually went down, so we can't discount what they have to say, and yet what they have to say sounds just kind of subjective. I mean, it's no more... The evidence is essentially people saying there's no way it could have been accidental. They came right in. Surely they would have seen the markings. Now there's a bit of dispute in various versions of events about exactly at what point Israel identified or was it capable of identifying that this was an American ship. The people on the Liberty claimed that the American flag was flying plain to sea, whereas the Israelis claimed they didn't see any flag. And by the time apparently they noticed that there were sort of American markings on the ship, had it been one from one of the Arab nations, it would have been in Arabic text, whereas there were... even if they couldn't read them, they would have been able to tell that it was in the English alphabet, and realised that it wasn't a ship belonging to one of their enemies. So, yeah, there's some disagreement about how quickly Israel should have been able to realise that they were attacking the wrong ship and call things off. But nevertheless, yeah, the evidence it's not what you'd call strong, I suppose. It's good in that it's from people who were right there in a lot of cases, but at the same time it does seem quite subjective and simply stating, outright statements that it couldn't have been an accident. They must have been acting deliberately. And
you might also postulate that the people who were survivors of the attack have a kind of vested interest in going, no, it can't have been an accident, I was there, people I knew died. So I can't believe an accident could have occurred, there must have been something more to the story.
Yeah.
Which is a possible psychological motivation for suspecting more than actually what happened on the day. I'm not saying it's not true, but it is something that needs to be at least considered.
Yeah, so I guess all we can say is that the evidence for this being a false flag is quite shaky, really, at all. I mean, if it was a false flag, it was a pretty rubbish one, and even if it wasn't a false flag, we still have the whole deliberate accidental issue to iron out beforehand. So on the accidental versus deliberate issue, again, what can we say? What evidence that I've seen presented has been largely sort of anecdotal and fairly subjective. On the other hand, it's coming from people who were there and were trained military men who you'd think would have some insight into.
And some of them would have been women as well.
1967.
Yeah, fairly sure.
On a military show? I honestly don't know how things worked in the US military back then in the 60s, but yes, you could be right.
It was the time of the mods.
It was. Woman's lib was in full swing. Nevertheless, these people, crew members, to use more gender-neutral terminology, were military people. So you'd think they would have, at least some idea of what they're talking about, what a deliberate versus an accidental friendly fire attack might look like. But yeah, there doesn't seem to be anything concrete enough to be able to claim anything either way.
No.
So yeah, I don't really know what to say for that. There's a slight thing that it could be a false flag event, but if we discount that, what would we call this? I mean, it's the deliberate claims that an accidental attack was made to look deliberate. Not a false flag, but kind of like one.
Yeah, false flag adjacent, as I said at the beginning of
false
the
flag-ish.
episode. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's interesting simply from that regard that it just seems to be a lot more murky than some of the other false flags we've talked about, some of which were found out to be false flags instantly, some of which were kept under wraps for a long time but were definitively proved to be false flags sometime later. This one...
This one relies on making some very key assumptions, which don't seem that tenable, truth be told.
No. So I guess that's all we can say.
Yes.
It's an interesting one, but
It's a false flag.
It's as far as
It's
we
a
can
real
go with
flag.
it. Yes, it's a real flag. Or was it? Because one of the things that's under contention is whether or not the real flag
Was flying
was
at the
flying
time.
or not.
Yeah.
Most strange. Most strange. Well, I think our time is more or less up.
At an end. Yes. Although it does make me think there's a almost accidental false flag story about the Auckland Harbour back from the end of the 19th century that we should talk about at some point in the future.
Is the North Head...
It's related to
Related to
North
North
Head.
Head,
It's actually
yes.
more to do with the Prussian scare of the 1890s, and that revolves around a military ship not flying its flag one particular morning, causing havoc in downtown Auckland, and 3 people died.
But you'll just have to wait. That's your teaser
Yep.
for a thing we'll talk about sometime in the future.
Before the end, or the heat death of the universe.
Before the end of all days. So, do we have any... No, there's no more admin-y, no more wrap-up-y stuff? No, straight
we
into
we are at the end.
straight into the end credits then. You've been listening to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy.
Or you've been watching the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy.
Yes, I should have possibly gestured towards the microphone, which wouldn't have made sense to the people listening, but then no, it doesn't matter. I've cocked it all up, Matthew. It's a shambles. It's all gone to pot.
It's an omni-shambles.
It's you are listening and watching both at the same time. Quite possibly, they might have the podcast on one thing and the video open in YouTube at the same time. If they're that dedicated, why aren't you doing that? Quite frankly, you call yourselves fans. They call themselves fans.
Have you considered using the YouTube's automated subtitle system? Because apparently it's hilarious.
No, I haven't, but I must.
Yes, you must.
Oh, okay. I'm going to do that for the next one. Yes.
And then what we should do as a Christmas present is do the script of one of the transcribed episodes. I'm sure it'll be hilarious.
I don't doubt that it would be for a second. So, as we have intimated, this podcast is available on numerous channels. It's available on YouTube as a vodcast, I believe the children call them. Just search YouTube for the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, but it's also a good old-fashioned podcast, which you can get to on iTunes, on Stitcher, on a few other places. It's officially hosted on Podbean at conspiracism.podbean.com, so if you want to get the real oil, go there. You can leave comments and stuff like that as well.
You can.
I think,
No one does, but you can.
No, you can. Yes, I suppose we should do the thing that everybody does on their podcast and say, if you're listening on iTunes, rate and give us 5 stars, because then it makes us easier to find, shows up on more recommendations or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It bolsters our fragile egos. That's the important thing.
And they are very, very fragile.
Now, as to you and I, as to I and he, my name is Josh Addison. If you wanted to get in touch with me, you could just chuck me a line on Twitter, where my name is Monkey Fluids. I think that's about it.
Yep. Whilst I am Dr. MRX Dentith, you can find me on Twitter with the handle HORansom or Conspiracism. One of those accounts is about conspiracy theories, the other is not. I'll let you work that out. And you can also find my blog at episto.org, which is mostly these days links to the podcast, but there'll be some exciting news about a new book and hopefully a new publication coming up on that blog very, very soon.
Keep your eyes peeled.
Actually, no, keep them lubricated.
Yes, no, blink occasionally.
Blink a lot.
Yeah, no, it's good for you, otherwise they dry out.
Yeah.
You can't wear contact lenses. Happened to my brother, you know.
Luckily he had that third eye.
Well, no, he just wears glasses. But combination of medication.
It must be very hard to get free-flamed. English is not my language today.
English has been no one's
which
language
is,
today,
I'm
unfortunately.
monolingual, is very, very bad.
It's a worry. No, I think it's time to call this. Stick around for a little bit after this, because there'll be the usual jingle at the end that talks about our patronage campaigns. If you felt like chucking us a bit of money, and probably an email address that you could use as well, and that people have used. Thank you very much for your correspondence.
Otherwise,
is the reason why we're not naming this person because we're not 100% certain how to pronounce their name?
You're not 100% certain how to pronounce their name, and I don't want to embarrass you.
Yep, that's true. It's all me. So, until next time, keep watching the skies.
Keep watching the skis. You've been listening to Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, hosted by Josh Addison and M. Denton. If you'd like to help support us, please find details of our pledge drive at either Patreon or Podbean. If you'd like to get in contact with us, email us at podcastconspiracy@gmail.com.